Okay, welcome to our video on how to attach the border tiles together. So as you know, our blankets design is a rectangular middle with little border tiles that go along the edges. So we're going to look at different ways that you can attach them together, either through sewing. So you'll want to have a needle handy. Right, you could have a larger darning needle. You could have a bent one, whatever your preference is really. So you can either sew it together or you can crochet together. Sewing together would be not too much work. What you would do if you wanted to sew it together is you would grab some of your white yarn. We're going to be attaching them through the seam right here to start. So if you wanted to sew them together, if that's your preference, what you would need to do is trim off a bit of yarn. So I'll kind of just trim a little just to show you. My preference is not to sew them together, but just in case yours is, I want to give that a little bit of time to think about. So if your preference is to sew, you're going to attach your yarn under the corner stitch. You're going to tie it on. Right, and you want to cut off enough that you can sew along this edge. Shouldn't need too much yarn. Might need to flip it upside down. There we go. Oop. Third try is the charm. There we go. So if your preference is to sew it, you want to make sure that the dragonflies are facing the same way. We're going to sew along the shorter edge, and really all you would need to do is just sew across. So I would go under the 2 loops, then under the 2 loops on this matching stitch, right under the 2 loops, under the next 2 loops. So this is an option if you prefer sewing, right? You get a nice seamless look. You'll just continue going under the 2 loops and then under the 2 loops. So that's option 1, is if you prefer, you can just sew across. I prefer to do crocheting just because I think it is a little bit more efficient.
So my preference, instead of sewing the sides together, is to crochet the sides together. So I'm going to show you next how to crochet the shorter 2 sides of the rectangles together. We're going to do this and create a huge strip of border tiles and then attach the longer sides to the main blanket.
Okay, so my preference is to crochet them together. So I'm going to go and attach my yarn into that kind of top right stitch as you're looking sideways. We are going to be sewing together the shorter sides, or sorry, crocheting together the shorter sides. Or you can sew if that's your preference, really up to you. Okay, so I'm just going to attach it, leaving a little bit of a tail, and we're going to work over that, so not to worry. I like doing 2 knots just to make it a little bit more secure. So this is the method I prefer when I crochet edges together. So I'm going to go back into that stitch, grab the yarn, pull it through, yarn over, and pull through a loop just to get up to the height. So in order to do this join method, you can do a lot of different methods, but this is the method I prefer. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a regular single crochet. So we're going to go into the stitch, that same stitch, grab the yarn, pull it through, 2 loops on our hook, yarn over, and pull through 2. You're going to pull the loop tall, and then we're going to make sure that we're the same direction, and we're going to put our hook through kind of that matching stitch in the same spot. You're going to put the yarn on, pull it taut, and you're going to carefully, you want to grip the yarn well, slide that through. So we're kind of anchoring it onto the stitch. And then this is real cool, this method. You're just going to go back into the next stitch, grab the yarn, pull it through. We're going to do another single crochet, keeping our little tail under. So that's our second single crochet. Then we're going to go into that next stitch on the upper. We're going to attach the yarn. We're going to pull it taut and carefully turn and pull it through. Okay, we're going to continue on to our third stitch. So we're just kind of continuing on really slowly, single crochets. This gets a lot faster as you get used to it. I'm just slowing it down for the video. We're going to attach this top stitch on the third one, right, tighten it, slowly angle it through, and then we're going to move on to our fourth stitch, and I'll just kind of do this whole row with you guys. So another single crochet, pull a little longer, find that matching single crochet stitch right above, put your hook through, attach the yarn. We're going to have to tighten that up, maneuver through that top stitch. Okay, we keep going, keeping that little tail under so we're hiding the tail as we're working. So our next single crochet, pull it long, find the matching one up above, attach yarn, tighten, pull through, and you can start seeing this join here. It's pretty seamless, which I appreciate. The cool thing is I'll grab another work that I have that has the same join, just so you guys can see. So this is a blanket I've done, and I'll kind of zoom out. So you can see the join here on the blanket. What it has is a slight little kind of curve to it. It has a cool twisting effect. If you don't want this twisting effect, you can join with other methods like sewing, etc. There's other ways you can also crochet together where you don't have a little bit of a twist, but it's like a very, if you zoom in, very minute little twist, and I think it gives it a nice bit of character, actually. Okay, so we're just gonna keep going. Eventually you'll get to the point where you can kind of push the tail off to the side and we'll snip it at the end. Yeah, so we're probably done with that tail. So continue doing your single crochets, yarning into that top stitch, grabbing that loop, tightening, maneuvering through, and that's just attaching it to the upper border tile. Okay, at this point I'm going to kind of ignore that tail. We'll trim it in a little bit. And we're just going to keep going. Doing that same crochet strategy. This is to crochet the edges together, and I think it just looks so sleek. And I love the little twisting effect that it gives. Okay, so we're just gonna keep doing that. I'm gonna keep the video on in case you wanna watch. If you wanna zoom ahead, feel free to zoom ahead or pause it and then kind of go ahead to the end if you wanna see how to tie it off. Okay, but we're just gonna keep going. And then as you get towards the end, you want to be kind of watching to try and mirror the stitches. If you're a little off, there are ways to compensate. So if I was realizing my edges were slightly off, I could, instead of single crocheting in one stitch, I could single crochet 2 together by grabbing the yarn, pulling it through, going to the next one, pulling it through, and then pulling through all 3. That would single crochet those 2 stitches together. You're not going to really need to worry about the edges being off for this. It's more so when we attach a whole string of these to the big middle blanket, or we'll kind of talk through ways to make sure that things line up okay and ways to compensate. So you'll see that in a future video where we might have to strategize if things are a little bit off with the border and based on tension. Sometimes that just happens no matter how careful we are to measure things as we're going. Sometimes it's just a little bit off. Okay, and I think we are at our last stitch here. Okay. Pull through. And then at this point, since we're done, we're just gonna yarn over and pull through to make a little knot. And I'm gonna trim. You don't have to leave a terribly long tail. You just want it long enough that you can sew it in and hide it. So the goal is to create a whole string of these going sideways for the side edges of the blanket. So all these tails on the top, what we're gonna do is after we attach these guys to the edge of the blanket, we're going to go around one final time on the very outer edge and do a nice single crochet border to make this a little cleaner. So you can actually leave these little guys on the top because the goal will be to do another single crochet around the whole thing once we're done, just to clean up these little lines because these won't be perfectly straight. So you can actually leave those tails for now if you like. I like leaving tails until the very end. That's my preference. But now let's talk about how many of these you're going to need to crochet together in order to get to the finished product. Okay, so my recommendation, we have 6 on the shorter side, 6 rectangle tiles, right? So we're sewing them this way. And then we have 8 rectangular tiles going sideways along both of the edges. Remember, we do have those square tiles as well. So my recommendation is actually to break it up into 2 separate chunks. So let me grab my pencil real quick. So my recommendation is to attach these guys on and these guys on. I would do 2 separate little chains of 6 and then 2 separate of these guys. And it's actually going to be a lot easier to attach to the blanket that way because we'll attach these 6 on first on the top and bottom, and then we can seamlessly attach this long strand on the sides. Okay, so your goal is to have 2 of these, 2 of the 6 long. Right, 6 rectangles long. And then you're going to have 2 that have got, I'll just kind of break it off. We have 2 squares, marking that all sides are equal. And then in between, you're going to have 8 of those rectangles. Okay, so these are the 2 different strips you're going to be trying to create.
So apologies for the interruption. I'm just doing a quick voiceover. So the notebook sketch was before I had actually created the strips. Here is a picture with the strips actually created, where we've got the strip of 6 rectangles on the top and bottom. You're going to want to attach those on the shorter sides. And then we've got the 2 strips that have the 8 rectangles and the 2 little square tiles. Do notice that I have mine lined up how I would like them to face, with the tops dragonflies facing up on the bottom, dragonflies facing sideways. Notice my corners are always facing up. That's just my preference. So I recommend you play around with the placement before you would make the 2 strips of 6 and then the 2 strips that have 8 rectangles with the 2 squares on top and bottom. Follow along in the next videos to look at attaching those strips to the blankets.